Okay, what is going on, ladies and gentlemen? We got a special backyard edition today of Think and Grow Rich. My name is Michael Music, and I have been studying this book, Think and Grow Rich, for 21 days now. And I would definitely like to celebrate this because they say 21 days is the start of a new habit. Personally, I'm not done until at least 18 months because that's when it's really a habit. However, definitely want to congratulate myself for making it this far reading this book. We are continuing along through the book, and I want to go over the chapter on the sixth sense. Now, okay, so this is actually chapter 14. I labeled it chapter 13. But anyways, yeah, so um, before I get started, I guess a little bit about me. My name is Michael Music. I graduated from Penn State University with a degree in mechanical engineering. I started out in door-to-door selling, and I haven't stopped selling since. And this book was a really cool cornerstone to helping me out because uh, let's say this, I used to be a total drifter, right? And then I started this business and worked on a painting business for about 8 months until eventually it ended up actually failing. And let me just say that that little setback, that little temporary defeat, really caused me to really reevaluate some things. And so what I've done was I eventually started getting into studying these books, like because I obviously wanted to get back into business and whatnot. And I came across this book and it really taught me to think. And I realized, oh, wow, like I was just a drifter this whole time. And I never knew how to think for myself. And so I say that to say my goal here in reading this book is to help you guys really just understand this philosophy because this isn't just a book that you read. This is really a philosophy. And I want to hopefully help you guys discover the secret within this book. Napoleon Hill mentions that no fewer than 100 times there's a secret in this book, and it's in every chapter of the book. And when you find it, when it hits you, you know your life may be changed forever. And he does not explicitly say the secret because that would kind of give it away. Personally, I don't know if I found the secret yet. I'm gonna keep looking, and that's why I want to keep reading this live to you guys. So we are on chapter 14, the sixth sense today, the door to the temple of wisdom, the 13th step toward riches. This is page 308. If anyone is reading along. Okay, cool. So let's get started. The 13th principle is known as the sixth sense, through which infinite intelligence may and will communicate without any effort from or demands by the individual. This principle is the apex of the philosophy. It can be assimilated, understood, and applied only by first mastering the other 12 principles. The sixth sense is the portion of the subconscious mind which has been referred to as the creative imagination. It has also been referred to as the receiving set through which ideas, plans, and thoughts flash into the mind. The flashes are sometimes called hunches or inspirations. So remember here, we said it a few times. The creative imagination is essentially the same exact thing that Napoleon Hill is referring to when he's talking about the sixth sense. And ideas, hunches, or inspirations will flash into your mind through this faculty. And that's kind of also what he's saying with when you pray, when you get an answer or whatever from infinite intelligence, you're really getting an idea, plan, or inspiration. So it's like there's also a part of you that has to do the work. So that's why it's cool to distinguish like what the sixth sense is. It's the medium on receiving these ideas, plans, and inspirations. The sixth sense defies description. It cannot be described to a person who has not mastered the other principles of this philosophy, because such a person has no knowledge and no experience with which the sixth sense may be compared. keep in mind the importance of understanding and really studying the other 12 principles. That's why I mentioned multiple times in the intro that this book isn't something where you can pick up, read once, and be like, okay, I'm thinking the way Napoleon Hill expected me to think. Really, you want to study this book to master these principles rather than just read them. There's a difference. Understanding of the sixth sense comes only by meditation through mind development from within. The sixth sense probably is the medium of contact between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence, and for this reason, it is a mixture of both the mental and the spiritual. It is believed to be the point at which the mind of man contacts the universal mind. Keep in mind how Napoleon Hill says the word probably. He doesn't know for sure. Like this is going deep, right? Like, is it really the medium from which universal intelligence can contact the mind of man? We're gonna go with the word probably. I'm gonna take Napoleon Hill's word for it now, until it fails me, pretty much. So I'm not saying it's 100% true, but it's definitely something that I believe. I'm gonna agree with Napoleon here. So you can only understand the sixth sense by meditation through mind development from within. What does that mean, and what does that look like to you? Because that can look like something different from everyone. So it's probably the medium of contact between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence. For this reason, it is a mixture of both the mental and the spiritual. Also, what does that look like? A mixture between the mental and the spiritual. That's kind of what's interesting about it. You can't quite describe physically what the sixth sense is because it's a mixture of mental and spiritual. So what would that mean? It's essentially energy, right? It's not matter. So when you think about it, I'm reading something that I cannot describe physically to you guys, but I really do want you to just use your imagination and come up with whatever picture you can imagine when you think of the sixth sense. It is believed to be the point at which the mind of man contacts the universal mind. After you have mastered the principles described in this book, you will be prepared to accept as truth a statement which may otherwise be incredible to you. Namely, through the aid of the sixth sense, you will be warned of impending dangers in time to avoid them and notified of opportunities in time to embrace them. Okay, so this is a good example. When you drive in your car, have you ever almost got into a car accident, but something about you like made that last minute turn? That was apparently your sixth sense coming into play. There comes to your aid and to do your bidding with the development of the sixth sense a guardian angel who will open to you at all times the door to the temple of wisdom. A guardian angel. There comes to your aid and to do your bidding with the development of the sixth sense a guardian angel who will open to you at all times the door to the temple of wisdom. Whether or not this is a statement of truth, you will never know except by following the instructions described in the pages of this book, or some similar method of procedure. The author is not a believer in, nor an advocate of miracles, for the reason that he has enough knowledge of nature to understand that nature never deviates from her established laws. Some of her laws are so incompressible that they produce what appear to be miracles. The sixth sense comes as near to being a miracle as anything I've ever experienced. And it appears so only because I do not understand the method by which this principle is operated. This much the author does know, that there is a power or a first cause or an intelligence which permeates every atom of matter and embraces every unit of energy perceptible to man. That this infinite intelligence converts acorns into oak trees, causes water to flow downhill in response to the law of gravity, follows night with day, and winter with summer, each maintaining its proper place in relationship to the other. This intelligence may, through the principles of this philosophy, be induced to aid in transmuting desires into concrete or material form. The author has this knowledge because he has experimented with it and experienced it. Okay, I'm going to pause there and break down that chunk of information we just read. So, Napoleon Hill is saying that there is a power or a first cause or an intelligence which permeates every atom of matter and embraces every unit of energy perceptible to man. Going back to The Science of Getting Rich, another great book that I highly recommend reading, it says there is a thinking substance which permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe, and through this thinking substance causes everything that is thought in this substance to be created. I may have reworded it by accident a little bit, but apparently there is this thinking substance. So what does that mean, a thinking substance? Which permeates every atom of matter and embraces every unit of energy perceptible to man. Okay. I'm going to say this. When they say that it permeates every atom of matter, that is essentially saying that this infinite intelligence we're referring to, I won't use the word God, I'll use the word infinite intelligence, but understand that I'm talking about the same thing, the creator, the higher power, whatever, permeates every atom of matter and embraces every unit of energy perceptible to man. So essentially it's saying that this thinking substance is in every atom of matter. For example, like the tree that I'm looking at right now, it's in there. It's in the desk. It's permeating every atom of matter. And then this intelligence may, through the principles of this philosophy, be induced to aid in transmuting desires into concrete or material form. The author has this knowledge because he has experimented with it and has experienced it. Step by step, through the preceding chapters, you have been led to this, the last principle. If you have mastered each of the preceding principles, you are now prepared to accept, without being skeptical, the stupendous claims made here. If you have not mastered the other principles, you must do so before you may determine definitely whether or not the claims made in this chapter are fact or fiction. Okay, yeah, so everything I'm saying, all this hoorah stuff I'm saying, it's kind of up to you to determine whether this is fact or fiction. And I don't want to say this is the end all be all, because it could be truly up to you to decide. So, but he is saying, step by step through the preceding chapters, you have been led to this, the last principle. So understand that every one of the last chapters that we've read through do lead up to this last principle, which is the chapter on the sixth sense. So I guess what he's saying is it would be definitely highly recommended to truly master these other principles. And I guess the best way to do so is through just continuous study of them. Because if you have mastered each of the preceding principles, you are now prepared to accept, without being skeptical, the stupendous claims made here. If you have not mastered the other principles, you must do so before you may determine definitely whether or not the claims made in this chapter are fact or fiction. While I was passing through the age of hero worship, I found myself trying to imitate those who I most admired. Moreover, I discovered that the element of faith with which I endeavored to imitate my idols gave me great capacity to do so quite successfully. I have never entirely divested myself of this habit of hero worship, although I've passed the age commonly given over to such. My experience has taught me that the next best thing to being truly great is to emulate the great by feeling in action as nearly as possible. So, who do you look up to? Who do you consider like a serious influence in your life? Not none of these influencers, these Instagram influencers out there, because truly, like, what are they doing besides posting bikini pics and pictures on the beach, right? I'm talking about like The people that have truly accomplished much in this world, who do you look up to and who inspires you? And because Napoleon Hill is saying here that his experiences taught him that the next best thing to being truly great is to emulate the great by feeling in action as nearly as possible. We're going to get more into it as we go through this book, but I want you to really start thinking, who is someone that you consider to be a truly great person that has achieved success in the area of life that you want? And can you start thinking of how you can emulate them? How you can emulate certain qualities of them? And keep in mind that not everyone that you look up to is perfect in all areas. There may be a person that is doing incredibly well financially. However, they just keep getting divorced, right? So you don't really want to study them on marriage, but you may want to emulate them in terms of finances. That's what he's saying. So Napoleon Hill says, long before I've ever written a line for publication or endeavored to deliver a speech in public, I followed the habit of reshaping my own character by trying to imitate the 9 men whose lives and life works has been most impressive to me. These 9 men were Emerson, Paine, Edison, Darwin, Lincoln, Burbank, Napoleon Ford, and Carnegie. Every night, over a long period of years, I held an imaginary council meeting with this group, whom I called my invisible counselors. The procedure was this. Just before going to sleep at night, I would shut my eyes and see, in my imagination, this group of men seated with me around my council table. Here I had not only an opportunity to sit among those whom I considered to be great, but I actually dominated the group by serving as the chairman. I had a very definite purpose in indulging my imagination through these nightly meetings. My purpose was to rebuild my own character, so it would represent a composite of the characters of my imaginary counselors. Realizing as I did early in life that I had to overcome the handicap of birth in an environment of ignorance and superstition, I deliberately assigned myself the task of voluntarily rebirth through the method here described. So we're going to be talking about the invisible counselors, right? And this is, when I first read this was one of those chapters I was like, what are you talking about? So understand that the reason he's bringing up the invisible counselors, or the purpose that he did this, was to rebuild his own character so that he could emulate the greats that he really looked up to. So we're going to dive into this topic and understand that this may actually sound like a bunch of hoorah BS the first time you hear this, right? That's how it sounded to me. And he explains that it will sound actually pretty stupid and stupendous until you have mastered the previous 12 principles. So I would say don't deny it yet, but you don't gotta accept it yet, because this is going out there. Okay, now we're on page 312. Building character through auto-suggestion. Being an earnest student of psychology, I knew, of course, that all men have become what they are because of their dominating thoughts and desires. I knew that every deeply seated desire has the effect of causing one to seek outward expression through which that desire may be transmuted into reality. I knew that self-suggestion is a powerful factor in building character, that it is, in fact, the sole principle through which character is built. With this knowledge of the principles of mind operation, I was fairly well armed with the equipment needed in rebuilding my character. In these imaginary council meetings, I called on my cabinet members for the knowledge I wished to each of them to contribute, addressing myself to each member in audible words as follows. Mr. Emerson, I desire to acquire from you the marvelous understanding of nature which distinguished your life. I ask that you make an impress upon my subconscious mind of whatever qualities you possess, which enabled you to understand and adapt yourself to the laws of nature. I ask that you assist me in reaching and drawing upon whatever Sources of knowledge are available to this end. Mr. Burbank, I request that you pass on to me the knowledge which enabled you to so harmonize the laws of nature that you caused the cactus to shed its thorns and become an edible food. Give me access to knowledge which enabled you to make two blades of grass grow where but one grew before, and help you to blend the coloring of the flowers with more splendid and harmony. For you alone have successfully gilded the lily. Napoleon, I desire to acquire from you, by emulation, the marvelous ability you possess to inspire men and to arouse them to greater and more determined spirit of action. Also, to acquire the spirit of enduring faith, which enabled you to turn defeat into victory and to surmount staggering obstacles. Emperor of Fate, King of Chance, Man of Destiny, I salute you. Mr. Payne, I desire to acquire from you the freedom of thought and the courage and clarity with which to express convictions which so distinguished you. Mr. Darwin, I wish to acquire from you the marvelous patience and ability to study cause and effect without bias or prejudice, so exemplified by you in the field of natural science. Mr. Lincoln, I desire to build into my own character the keen sense of justice, the untiring spirit of patience, the sense of humor, the human understanding, and the tolerance which were your distinguishing characteristics. Mr. Carnegie, I'm already indebted to you for my choice of a life work, which has brought me great happiness and peace of mind. I wish to acquire a thorough understanding of the principles of organized effort, which you use so effectively in the building of great industrial enterprises. Okay, I'm just going to pause for a sec. So he's talking to these people, and funny enough, some of them actually have passed away, right? However, he is treating them like they're real, that they're still there. And I'm gonna read two more people and explain further, but just like so you know that he's not talking to these people in real life. He's talking to these people in his imagination. Mr. Ford, you have been among the most helpful of the men who have supplied much of the material essential to my work. I wish to acquire your spirit of persistence, the determination, poise, and self confidence which have enabled you to master poverty, organize, unify, and simplify human effort so I may help others to follow in your footsteps. Mr. Edison, I have seated you nearest to me at my right because of the personal cooperation you have given me during my research into the causes of success and failure. I wish to acquire from you the marvelous spirit of faith with which you have uncovered so many of nature's secrets, the spirit of unremitting toil with which you have so often wrested victory from defeat. Okay, we're going to now explain what he's doing. So my method of addressing the members of the imaginary cabinet would vary according to the traits of character in which I was, for the moment, most interested in acquiring. I studied the records of their lives with painstaking care. After some months of this nightly procedure, I was astounded by the discovery that these imaginary figures became apparently real. Each of these nine men developed an individual Each of these nine men developed individual characteristics which surprised me. For example, Lincoln developed the habit of always being late, then walked around in solemn parade. When he came, he walked very slowly with his hands clasped behind him, and once in a while he would stop as he passed and rest his hand momentarily upon my shoulder. He always wore an expression of seriousness upon his face. Rarely did I see him smile. The cares of a sundered nation made him grave. I'm gonna pause for a sec. I just got to say this real quick. So Napoleon Hill mentions that he studied some of these people with painstaking care. So, for example, Lincoln was before his time, and how did he study Lincoln? Through reading his biography, right, and really studying that. And he studied them, and it's definitely helped me out in a sense from my experience studying some of the world's greatest, most successful people. And a lot of that studying came from reading books. So A lot of people have this idea in their mind that reading books is not cool and whatnot, but I will tell you from my personal experience, that has helped me develop a much greater vision. Being only 22 years old and reading someone's life biography, you get to see their perspective from a much older age. Like, for example, Sam Walton wrote Made in America, and he wrote that book on his deathbed. So I was able to read that book and see his life's events that really led him to building one of the greatest empires in the world, known as Walmart. And I would suggest that that's a start to understanding what Napoleon Hill is saying here. To just one, start by studying successful people that you look up to in certain areas that you are, and like have an intention on why you're studying them. Like, study this one specific person for their financial education, and maybe study another individual for public speaking or whatnot. There may be an area, but don't take them. Like, even Napoleon Hill, I'm not going to take every area of his life and like worship it, if you know what I mean by that. I'm going to take the way he thinks and controls his mind, and that's the reason I'm studying Napoleon Hill. But anyways, going back to what we're talking about now, he mentions that he was astounded by the discovery that these imaginary figures became apparently real. So does that sound out there to you? And or can you believe him when he says that? And so keep in mind, he's talking to all these people in his imagination, but they became apparently real. And now he's talking about the characteristics of some of the people. I'm going to continue on. This chapter is a long one, so we're going to split it up into a few parts. However, I really do want to get through the next 2 pages because I want to wrap this up on a good note, because this chapter does get much better. I know we're just talking about a guy talking about people in his imagination, but I'm telling you, there's a reason this chapter is so important. So continuing on page 315, that was not true of the others. Burbank and Payne often indulged in witty repartee, which seemed at times to shock the other members of the cabinet. One night, Payne suggested that I prepare a lecture on the age of reason and deliver it from a pulpit of a church which I formerly attended. Many around the table laughed heartily at the suggestion. Not Napoleon. He drew his mouth down at the corners and groaned so loudly that all turned and looked at him with amazement. To him, the church was but a pawn of the state, not to be reformed, but to be used as a convenient inciter to mass activity by the people. On one occasion, Burbank was late. When he came, he was excited with enthusiasm and explained that he had been late because of an experiment he was making, through which he hoped to be able to grow apples on any sort of tree. Payne chided him by reminding him that it was an apple which started all the trouble between man and woman. Darwin chuckled heartily as he suggested that Payne should watch out for little serpents when he went into the forest to gather apples, as they had the habit of growing into big snakes. Emerson observed, "No serpents, no apples," and Napoleon remarked, "No apples, no state." Lincoln developed the habit of always being the last one to leave the table after each meeting. On one occasion, he leaned across the end of the table, his arms folded, and remained in that position for many minutes. I made no attempt to disturb him. Finally, he lifted his head slowly, got up, and walked to the door, then turned around, came back, and laid his hand on my shoulder and said, "My boy, you will need much courage if you remain steadfast in carrying out your purpose in life. But remember, when difficulties overtake you, the common people have common sense. Adversity will develop it." Okay. So these are just traits still that he's describing of members in his imaginary council and different stories that he has experienced. So I can't quite relate to this right now. I haven't gotten that much in depth with my imaginary council. I do want to point out, so moving forward, I'm on page 316. If you guys are studying this book, this one page is so important when I'm about to read. I highly suggest that you go to page 316. I got the deluxe version. I'm not sure if it is the same page on every book, But with the deluxe version, go to page 316 and listen closely to the next part of this page that I'm going to read. This is where I really want to end it off. I'll end off after reading 2 more pages, right? One evening, Edison arrived ahead of all the others. He walked over and seated himself at my left, where Emerson was accustomed to sit, and said, "You are destined to witness the discovery of the secret of life. When the time comes, you will observe that life consists of great swarms of energies or entities, each as intelligent as human beings think themselves to be. These units of life group together like hives of bees and remain together until they disintegrate through lack of harmony. These units have differences of opinion, the same as human beings, and often fight among themselves. These meetings which you are conducting will be very helpful to you. They will bring to your rescue some of the same units of life which served the members of your cabinet during their lives. These units are eternal, they never die. Your own thoughts and desires serve as the magnet which attracts units of life from the great ocean of life out there. Only the friendly units are attracted, the ones which harmonize with the nature of your desires." Okay, so keep in mind, Napoleon Hill is telling a story, and he's doing this thing, the invisible counselors, right? And he's telling that one evening, Thomas Edison, in his imagination, walked over to him and described what I just read here, saying that there's great swarms of energy, and they group together like hives of bees and remain together until they disintegrate through lack of harmony. And Edison also mentions that these units are eternal and they never die. So keep in mind this principle. In engineering, we learned that there's this law, right? There's that no energy can be created nor destroyed. And so I'm going to be talking about afterlife stuff, but hear me out. Essentially, you're not, even though you're going to end up pass away, whatever, um, you're not going anywhere. You can't literally be destroyed. Like if you believe that you have a soul or that you are a soul, essentially that is energy, right? And according to the law of physics, no energy can be created nor destroyed. It can only be changed. So at the end of the day, your energy is just going to be changed. And what Edison is saying here is that even in the afterlife, after you pass away, the units will basically, it's like attracts like, essentially, and they will group together in harmony, right? So these imaginary counselors, even though a lot of people that Napoleon Hill is talking about that have passed away, doesn't mean they're gone. I don't know what's the details about it. I'll just say this, I guess. In religion, I believe we came from someplace and we're going someplace, and that's that. So I don't want to get too in depth on the afterlife, but just keep in mind that it's interesting how Edison explains that these units are eternal and they never die. And only the friendly units are attracted, the ones which harmonize with the nature of your desires. So I'm just going to put that out there. Do whatever you want with that information. I'm not saying that's the end all be all, and you don't got to take my word on it. That's just what I believe, I guess. Anyways, the other members of the cabinet began to enter the room, and Edison got up and slowly walked around to his seat. Edison was still living when this happened. It impressed me so greatly that I went to see him and told him about the experience. He smiled broadly and said, "Your dream was more a reality than you imagined it to have been." He added no further explanation to his statement. These meetings became so realistic that I became fearful of their consequences and discontinued them for several months. The experiences were so uncanny that I was afraid if I continued them, I would lose sight of the fact that the meetings were purely experiences of my imagination. Some 6 months after I had discontinued the practice, I was awakened one night, or thought I was, When I saw Lincoln standing at my bedside, he said, "The world will soon need your services. It is about to undergo a period of chaos which will cause men and women to lose faith and become panic-stricken. Go ahead with your work and complete your philosophy. That is your mission in life. If you neglect it for any cause whatsoever, you will be reduced to a primal state and be compelled to retrace the cycles through which you have passed during thousands of years." So Lincoln's going up to Napoleon Hill and essentially saying, "Listen, man, if you are neglecting your purpose in life, you will be reduced to a primal state and compelled to retrace the cycles through which you have passed during thousands of years." What does that mean? Be compelled to retrace the cycles through which you have passed during thousands of years. What does that mean? Does that mean you Lincoln is saying that you will repeat life over and over again until you complete your life purpose? And if that's true, do you want to complete your life person in this lifetime or in the next lifetime? That's an interesting thought. Also, I want to say I apologize for the previous page of really saying my beliefs on the afterlife. What I should have done was ask questions to just make you think rather than saying what I think. I'm gonna be real. I don't truly understand what's going on after you die. I just know this. I just know this one law that I believe so deeply, that is energy cannot be created nor destroyed. That is straight up a law of science. And I was trying to communicate that you really don't just disappear after you die. That's all I'm saying. Um, I hope I got it out right. But anyways, I just want to put that out there. So anyways, Napoleon Hill, moving on, is saying, "I was unable to tell the following morning whether I had dreamed this or had actually been awake, and I've never since found out which it was, but I do know that the dream, if it were a dream, was so vivid in my mind the next day that I resumed my meetings the following night. At our next meeting, the members of my cabinet all filled into the room together and stood at their accustomed places at the council table while Lincoln raised a glass and said, 'Gentlemen, let us drink a toast to a friend who has returned to the fold.'" Cool. I'm going to pause there. We're on page 318 in Think and Grow Rich, the deluxe version. I'm almost at 40 minutes. And this is going to be a multiple parts for the Sixth Sense. So we only got a few pages left, but that's good. That's good stuff because I wanted to make it a 2-part series for the Sixth Sense. Let me know what you think. What does the invisible counselors, Napoleon's describing this story to you, and he said it in a book because he did not want to tell anyone about it because he knew he would be labeled as crazy. Let me ask you, after reading this book once through, do you agree with him that maybe it could be an interesting idea to have your own invisible counselors? Do you think this is a bunch of hoorah BS? What would you do to start with this information, knowing that Napoleon Hill has found himself great benefit to the fact that he had his own mastermind of invisible counselors? So what would be a good start for you if you were to test out this idea and see if it worked for yourself? What would that start look like? When would you start? What else? Anyways, why do you think also that Napoleon Hill is describing this Sixth Sense as the apex of this philosophy? And why does he say you have to understand the previous 12 principles if you truly want to understand this 13th principle? Why does he say that, right? So these are some good questions that I have in mind as I read up this chapter. I want to apologize again for saying my beliefs and what he's like really transcribing here, because he's talking about some really out there stuff, and I should have asked questions rather than state it. So next time I read it, just understand that's what I'm going to do. Anyways, we're going to pause on page 318. This was episode 21 of Think and Grow Rich. As I start to build the community up, I'd love to hear from you. What'd you learn? What'd you like from this? Does any of this spark any ideas on what you can possibly do in the future? Also, one last question I want to ask, going back to the beginning of this chapter, what is the sixth sense again? Like, what is the sixth sense? What is it related to? And what is the purpose of the sixth sense? So those are just some final questions, final thoughts I had on this chapter, Think and Grow Rich. I want to thank you guys for listening in and watching. I greatly appreciate you guys studying this book with me. I truly think this philosophy will be the key, especially for me. Because I'll tell you straight up, I'm not rich right now, right? I just graduated college. However, it's going to be cool to prove that this book works because I started teaching this live and I got all the recordings to show it. Not teaching it live, but having a group discussion and reading it out loud live. And my goal is to get rich and show people that this book is a great philosophy to study and it has worked for me. So that's my final thoughts. Thank you guys for watching. See you on Facebook and YouTube. Until we meet again in time and space, I'll see you for now.